In ordering one's life, let the end direct the means. So St. Thomas writes, but it is impossible to put various things in order without knowing the relation and proportion among them, and with regard to something higher, which is their end. That is, it's impossible to order our lives well without knowing our goal. It's impossible to prioritize among different parts of our life without discerning the hierarchy among them. Unlike the rest of God's creation, which is ordained to God as its end by necessity, we human beings must use our freedom to direct ourselves to that proper end, which again is God himself. And yet we are ill-governed by our own minds, such as they are darkened by original sin, and so it becomes difficult to discern the next step, to make the best choice, to prioritize our time, even if we have made the prior decision to do only what God would have of us. But thankfully, for us Catholics, we are not afloat the sea without a hull, a centerboard, and a rudder. The Church offers us an architecture to keep aligned with God's will so we are not pulled by the currents of the culture. This architecture is supplied by our duties of state, our obligations that arise from our particular vocation. Being faithful first and foremost to our duties of state helps us to rightly order our life as we navigate its opportunities. So our fourth principle, our duties of state are really the non-negotiables for living properly, a properly ordered life through which grace can act, or to recall our metaphor again, through which a properly rigged boat is outfitted to receive the strength and the power of the wind. So what are these duties? Well, the first duty is that shared by all baptized Christians. It's the duty we have as children of God to give an authentic response to our baptismal call to be saints. So I'm going to get to some helpful practices in a bit, but a first necessary step on the path to sanctity is this. Let us set our minds and our hearts to abide by the teachings of our mother, the Church. And let us rely upon the transformative grace of the sacraments to do this, especially frequent reception of the Eucharist. Love your enemies, don't gossip or complain. Pray for those who persecute or even annoy you. Be generous with the poor and vulnerable. Live a spirit of Christian poverty detached from the goods of this world. Play by the rules before marriage and be open to children within marriage. Following Christ's teachings, especially when they are difficult, helps us to die to self and allows Christ to live in us, refashioning our souls in his image. I've seen in the lives of so many Catholic women the graces won by faithfulness to difficult teachings of the Church, even when it seemed impossible, humanly speaking, to follow them. These women radiate a blessed joy and confidence in the face of life's challenges, sanctified as they have been by grace, by God's very life within them. So study the Church's teachings, question them, scrutinize them, pray through them, and then honor them. And when you fail, seek out God's bountiful mercy in confession, his strengthening love in the Eucharist, and Our Lady's tender care in the Rosary. The riches that such faithfulness bestows are manifold. So if our duties as disciples of Christ, as daughters of God, are at the core of our responsibilities, we next assume duties based on our vocation to marriage, or for most of us, to single or religious life. Every vocation is a chosen path of self-gift, a voluntary constraint on our independence in which we commit and recommit ourselves day by day to acting for the good of others. And make no mistake about it, the duties of state for a married woman, much like a woman who commits herself to religious life, involve a dramatic giving over of one's body, one's time, one's affections. Your life as a wife and mother is definitely not your own, and there is a real giftedness in that. As one writer put it, the blessings of maternity are found mostly in the space that is opened by a radical redrawing of priorities. Through marriage and motherhood, we are pulled out of the never-ending creep of self-centeredness and daily made anew through the care of our spouses and our dependent children. Marriage and motherhood are great schools of virtue, of wisdom, and of sanctity if we allow God to transform us through them. And so as women who are called to married life, think about what it would mean to simultaneously engage in the work of the home and the work out in the world, It's critical to remember that our time and affections are owed to our spouses and our children above all. This is true of married men and women. This is true of married men as well. All work is always a means to sustain one's family and to pursue the common good, never an end in itself. But it must be said that due to the reality of human embodiedness, women are entrusted, and often to our surprise, once we bear children, feel more entrusted, want to be more entrusted with the nurture and care of our children when they are very young. Becoming a mother is itself transformative in this way. It's no wonder that in the United States, mothers of young children prefer part-time to full-time work, and in countries such as Norway, where generous social benefits encourage both mothers and fathers to care for their children, mothers' time at home still predominates. Recognizing this interior draw toward caring for our own children, whatever our professional abilities and aspirations, is a great help to determining how to make use of the gifts and time God has given us. And let it also be said, quite emphatically, that the care of the human person, especially those put in our care in our own families, while not honored in the culture as it once was, is an urgent task, perhaps especially today. I dare say it is the most important work any of us will do. The work of nurturing and educating the young in virtue, in manners and morals and faith and work ethic and social graces. This work is an essential and time-consuming task of every human culture. And refocusing on this work is especially needed in our own country today, for we know how crucial a virtuous people is to maintaining a democratic republic. At this time when our republic seems to be crumbling in on itself, the work of the family and of civil society, of those institutions in between the individual and the state, churches and schools and other local initiatives, that work is a particular urgency right now. And it is women who have disproportionately dedicated themselves to this person and culture-forming work as a matter of course and gratis for centuries. Indeed, Alexis de Tocqueville, the great French observer of democracy in America, wrote in the celebrated book by that name, "And now I come to the end of this book, in which I've recorded so many considerable achievements of the Americans. If anyone asks me what I think the chief cause of the extraordinary prosperity and growing power of this nation, I should answer that it is due to the superiority of its women." Why? Because in America's pioneering women, Tocqueville saw an interior strength that inspired them to dedicate their lives not outward toward accomplishment in the world, but homeward toward the nurture of persons, the cultivation of virtue, and the building of community. Much has, of course, changed since Tocqueville's time, and both our country and our church now recognize that the world needs women's voices as well. But let us not ever forget that all else is built upon the essential work carried out in the family. Both the church and the world need courageous, generous, well-formed Catholic families. Let us be faithful to this call.